This one is going to be interesting because, well, let's be honest, the Sisters of Battle, the Adepta Sororitas, aren't exactly doing very well right now. So any form of competitive list is still probably going to be rather subpar in comparison to some of the other armies in the game. But here we are, we're doing another top 5 video, and the Adepta Sororitas are up next with their 10th edition index. Let's be honest, they do have a truly gorgeous, reasonably new model range. They got their big release back in 2019, I want to say, which sounds really a long time ago, but actually is fairly recent, I guess. So let's dive into their index and their units and see just what some of their best are. As always, this is going to be 5 units in the index that I really rather like, and that I think if you are trying to put together the strongest list possible and get the most bang out of the army, are probably ones that you should at least be thinking about or considering when you are putting a list together. And as I mentioned, yes, Sisters are in a bad spot right now. They are arguably one of the bottom 2 or 3 factions in the game, so this is going to be a bit tricky to do, but there are still some standout units in the book comparatively to other stuff, at least in the index. And one of the really strong combos in there brings us the first 2 units in this list, and leading that particular combo is the character of Morvenn Val. She comes along in her warsuit, which brings her stat line up to an impressive toughness 6 with 8 wounds, a 2-up save, a 4-up invulnerable save, and a respectable 8-inch move to get around the board. So she is relatively tanky, and at just 125 points she does bring a solid amount of wounds for that price tag. And then to help booster her almost must-take status in the army right now, her damage output at both ranged and melee is also rather good. She sports her heavy bolter Fidelis, which is 3 strength 6 shots with sustained hits 1 and 2 damage, and then also a missile launcher that can fire either 2 strength 9 minus 2 AP d6 damage shots or 2d6 strength 4 1 damage shots at 36 inches. So she can put out some firepower. She essentially has a slightly better heavy bolter and a cyclone missile launcher to fire as she moves up the board. And then in melee, her Lance of Illumination has the always useful dual profile. It can either sweep for 10 strength 5 minus 1 AP 1 damage attacks, or strike for 5 attacks at strength 8 minus 2 AP and 3 damage, but also dishing out some devastating wounds into the mix as well. So it's not super scary. Strength 8 is a big limiting factor, but she can do some damage at both range and in melee to help you get through your opponent. On the rules front, she of course has Acts of Faith, which is really nice. It lets her use some of your all-important miracle dice, which is your army rule. And then on a more personal level, she has the Abbess Sanctorum rule, which grants her and the unit she's joined reroll hit and reroll wound rolls, which means her squad is basically always getting permanent pre-codex Oath of Moment for the Marines, which is genuinely really good. That kind of rule, reroll hits and reroll wounds, is genuinely one of the better rules in the game at the moment, so that is a really nice buff that she brings. And then she also has a rule, Righteous Repugnance, which is a once per game ability that you use in your command phase, and it lets her until the next command phase add 3 to the attacks of both her heavy bolter Fidelis and her lance. So it means that it will impact both your turn and your opponents if you are in melee, because it is till the next battle round, and it means you are going to be getting 6 shots from your heavy bolter, or potentially 8 strength 8 minus 2 AP 3 damage attacks from the lance, which is quite nice to be honest, especially with all of those rerolls. So she can do a good bit of work, and she does bring some really good buffs to the Paragon Warsuits, which is the only unit that she can join. In the next spot in this list, we do have those aforementioned Paragon Warsuits. These have had a solid price drop as of the latest field manual. They're now 200 points for 3, and they each have a toughness 6, 4 wound, 2-up save profile with a 4-up invuln, and like Morvenn, an 8-inch move. So for essentially around 66 points per model, they're okay. They're not amazing. just on their own, but they are certainly one of the tankier units in the Sisters Codex, or the Sisters Index, should I say, and being with Morvenn, which is basically the only place they can go if you really want to bring them, does make them really quite good. They can shoot and charge in a turn they've fallen back thanks to their Righteous Paragons rule, which is a solid mobility rule for them to have. It helps them to avoid getting tied up by chaff, as well as go into the units and get around the board a bit more quickly. And then, like Morvenn, they do actually have a reasonably good amount of both ranged and melee damage output. They can all either take a heavy bolter, a heavy flamer, or a multi-melter, so you can go after infantry or vehicles as your sort of preferred targets as you kind of want to build them. And then they also come with either a Paragon grenade launcher or some storm bolters for either a few extra strength 9 shots from the grenades or a few extra anti-infantry shots from the storm bolters. So you can kind of kit them out to be really good at anti-infantry, reasonably good at anti-vehicle, or a nice mix of the two. In general, I prefer the storm bolters and multi-melters as an option. I just think it's more useful in kind of every situation that you may come across. And whilst the multi-melters aren't the best anti-tank in the game at the moment, let's be honest, they are still pretty much the only thing Sisters have in terms of spammable anti-tank weaponry, so they really are something you do need to take. So stocking up on as many as you possibly can throughout your army will help you just kind of reach some kind of acceptable level of anti-tank in your list, even if it isn't as amazing as a lot of other armies have it at the moment. And then in melee, they either have a war blade or a war mace. Again, these give them a solid target choice, either anti-infantry or more anti-vehicle. The blades are 4 strength 6, minus 2 AP, 2 damage attacks, so they're good at killing marines and other infantry, whilst the maces are 3 attacks, but they are strength 12, minus 1 AP and 3 damage. The minus 1 AP for the mace really does hurt, as does the 1 less attack compared to the sword, as does the fact they only hit on 4s rather than 3s, so in general the maces don't sound all that great. But again, Sisters really do struggle for anti-tank, so that strength 12 will come in handy if you do need some more high strength weaponry in your list. It's a bit of a trade-off, and I personally think going 2 swords and 1 mace is the best pick. It gets you a solid amount of anti-infantry attacks from the blades, and then you can use that strength 12 to help you crack vehicles, as well as use stratagems like tank shock thanks to the strength 12 that the mace gives you. With Morvenn, they are obviously a lot better because they get rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound, so that massively improves their damage output at both ranged and melee. So if you are bringing Paragon Warsuits, you will likely be bringing Morvenn Val 100% of the time, and if you are bringing Morvenn Val, you may as well bring some Paragon Warsuits so she has a unit to join and she doesn't just get shot off the board straight away. So whilst they are both very, very, very interlinked, and I would say Morvenn is good just in her own merit and on her own right, the Paragon Warsuits, although they're in this list, they're still a bit iffy, but I do think taking them with Morvenn, which you always will do, does make them one of the better units in the Sisters Index, which is why they are in this list. And taking 3 Warsuits and Morvenn gets you a 325 point unit that can put out a respectable amount of damage at long range, some good damage in melee, and they have that decent 8-inch move, so you can actually get across the board and get into combat reasonably quickly. In the third spot in our list, we see our third vehicle, and yes, Sisters do rely on vehicles a lot at the moment. Their basic infantry units are just kinda sucky, but the Castigator Tank is up next. This again brings you some very useful durability. It's toughness 10, 11 wounds with a 3-up save and a 6-up invuln, so it's nothing exactly out this world. But in an army that has a lot of toughness 3, 3-up saves like Sisters, it is one of their more durable units. And at 140 points, it is a tiny bit more than the equivalent Space Marine Predator that it is based on, but it is also in some ways slightly superior. The 6-up invuln isn't much admittedly, but it can help in those rare moments when you do need to make a save and it does just happen to save you. And on top of that, this thing comes with 3 heavy bolters base, rather than the 2 that a Space Marine Predator does, so that is already 9 reasonably solid anti-infantry shots with sustained hit 1 on this tank. The turret weapon, on the other hand, unlike Space Marine Predators, is 2 completely new guns. It can either be the Castigator Battle Cannon or the Castigator Autocannon. The Battle Cannon is D6 plus 3 shots at strength 10, minus 1 AP and 3 damage, and the Autocannon is 4 shots with rapid fire 4, so 8 shots within 24 inches, and it is strength 9, minus 1 AP, and again 3 damage, and it is also twin linked. On top of that, the Castigator's special rule, the Rites of Castigation, gives each of those weapons a buff. Autocannons get to reroll hit rolls against infantry units, whilst the Battle Cannon gets to reroll its hit rolls against monsters and vehicles. And then also on top of that, any unit hit by either of those guns does also have to take a battle shock test. So whilst either of these options are good against a specific target, there is a big issue with them, and that is that they are both only AP1, which really does suck, especially with the amount of cover you can quite easily get in 10th edition. It means the Castigator does suffer a lot. It can get wounds through fairly well at being strength 10 or strength 9 with twin linked, but actually getting past enemy saves is really quite difficult for this tank. It's not a bad all-rounder, and if you know you're up against sort of a lot of infantry or a lot of vehicles, then you can take the weapon option which is best suited for it and do a decent chunk of damage over the course of the game. Like personally, I've seen Castigators one-shot things like Chaos Knight War Dogs with the Battle Cannon, so it can actually do some damage. It's just a little bit niche thanks to that AP1 that really will make you feel like you're just hitting a brick wall sometimes and really struggle to get past those armor saves. So it can be a bit of a frustrating tank, but again, it is one of the more durable and one of the better damaging, especially at range, units that these sisters have access to. So bringing 1 or 2 in a list is, I think, genuinely quite a good idea just to bring some extra firepower to your army. Up in 4th place, we have, surprise, surprise, another vehicle. This time we are looking at the Penitent Engines. These guys are cheap at 60 points per model, and that brings you a toughness 6, 5 wound, 4 up save unit with a very handy 5 up feel no pain. So they can take quite a beating, and with an 8-inch move they can also bear down on the enemy really quite quickly, and then when they get into combat they are also relatively scary too. Penitent Engines have Penitent Flamers and then a choice of melee weapons. They can either take twin Buzzblades, twin Flails, or a Buzzblade and a Flail. The Flamers are Assault, twin linked and ignore cover, and they fire 2d6 strength 5 1 damage attacks, so they're not bad at cooking light enemy infantry. And then on the melee front, the Buzzblades are your stronger anti-armor, anti-elite option. They are 4 strength 10 attacks at minus 3 AP and 2 damage with sustained hits 1, whilst the Flail is 8 attacks at strength 5, minus 1 AP and 1 damage, so good at clearing through chaff. Obviously both get twin linked if you take the twin option for those reroll wound rolls, whilst taking one of each just gives you the option to choose whichever is best for a given situation. I think the twin options are kind of better overall. You just need to make sure you're sending them into the right target. But the important thing for Penitent Engines, I think, is that they can advance and charge with endless suffering. So they really can move. They've got an 8-inch move, a d6 advance, and then a 2d6 charge, so they can get into combat really quite quickly, and of course with Assault on the Flamers, they can even shoot before they charge in. So kit these guys up for either anti-armor or anti-chaff, and then just let them loose at the enemy, and they will quite often be a very useful, very speedy, reasonably survivable, especially thanks to that feel no pain, and genuinely scary threat that the enemy just has to take care of really quickly, or they will be in your opponent's battle lines by turn 2, just tearing stuff up. Finally, we have our one and only non-vehicle unit in this list, the Triumph of St. Catherine. This thing is fairly complex. It's basically a walking parade with a load of bodies. It's only a 6-inch move, and it's only toughness 3, but it does have 18 wounds, and with a 3-up save and a 4-up invuln, you could argue it's not super tough, but equally it's not that easy to kill because it is a lot of wounds to get through. And then on top of that, quite hilariously, it can also join a Battle Sisters squad because it is a leader, so you can on top of that get an extra 10 toughness 3 ablative wounds if you need to make it even tankier. So it is, from that perspective, a really good option in my opinion. Again, it's only 125 points, so it's not super pricey, but the thing is you don't really take this thing for something like its damage output. At range, it's only got 6 bolt pistol attacks, and then it does have, to be fair, 18 attacks in melee, which are reasonable. They're not too amazing, but they are strength 5, minus 2 AP and 1 damage. So it's got a lot of attacks. It can certainly clear chaff very easily, but at the same time, it's only going to kill around 3 marine bodies in combat, so it's nothing super amazing. But what this thing is good at, the reason you bring it in your army, is it has some very good buffs. And you get to choose 2 abilities at the start of the battle round, and it gives them out in an aura until the next battle round. And some of them, as I said, are very good. The Fiery Heart gets you an automatic 6 on your miracle dice if a unit is destroyed within 6 inches of the Triumph. Censer of the Sacred Rose gives units within 6 inches +1 to their leadership. Simulacrum of the Argent Shroud grants +1 attacks to ranged weapons for units within 6 inches. But the last 3 you can choose from are arguably the best, I think. Icon of the Valorous Heart grants a 6-up Feel No Pain aura within 6 inches, which will help a lot for keeping your toughness 3 squishy bodies alive around it. Petals of the Bloody Rose gives you lethal hits in melee within 6 inches, which again is super good for things kind of grouped up around it. Things like Sacrosancts, Paragon Warsuits, or even Flagellants and Repentia will really like that lethal hits on their weapons. And then what I would say is arguably the best, the Simulacrum of the Ebon Chalice lets you use multiple acts of faith per phase rather than just one. So now you can front load a load of good miracle dice onto units like Retributor squads with their multi-melters to make sure you get some guaranteed hits and wounds and damage rolls through, rather than just relying on one miracle dice per phase. Or if you need to make a few saves, you can make sure that you definitely pass a good 2 or 3 of them if you absolutely need to, rather than just having one guaranteed save. It's a really useful ability, and in some ways almost turns Miracle Dice into an admittedly weaker version of the old Eldari Fate Dice before they got nerfed. It's still not as good as Fate Dice are or were, but it is still a very nice buff for the sisters to have. And I think being able to choose 2 of these means that the Triumph in a sort of anchor point around your line can massively buff a lot of stuff around it, and it does really act as this solid, reasonably survivable midfield anchor point to put your sisters around and just get a load of, Feel No Pain or lethal hits, or just a great way to spend your miracle dice on multiple kind of units for multiple times across the phase. So it really can help you boost your durability, it really can help you boost your damage, and I think for 125 points, it's definitely something to consider building your army around. So there we go, that is the Sisters of Battle. As I said, they are kind of struggling right now. Let's be honest, even some of these units often pale in comparison to some of the things that other armies have access to, but they are 5 units that I think personally, if I was taking the Adepta Sororitas to a competitive game, I would really strongly consider bringing, just to make my army as tough and as fast and as punchy as I possibly could. But as always, what do you think of these units? And what are your top picks from the Sisters Index? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.